Hello, everyone. Today we have a very distinguished guest, Professor Herbert Reginbogin from American Catholic University. Professor Reginbogin is an expert on international law, neutrality, and American foreign policy. He has published extensively on Second World War, Nuremberg trials, neutrality in foreign policy, as well as American foreign policy debates. Professor Reginbogin continues to teach at American Catholic University, and he also gives online lectures at Istanbul Kent University. Professor, it's a privilege to have you here. Thank you so much. I want to start with a question. As we all witnessed, there was a shocking development in the United States 2 days ago. Presidential candidate and former President Donald Trump was shot and tried to be assassinated in a meeting in Pennsylvania. As an American professor who has close connections with the political and academic elite, could you tell us what seems to have happened there, basically, first of all?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very glad to be here this morning. In reference to the question, am I surprised? Why would you be surprised in a gun culture when millions of guns are being sold everywhere in America? Why would you even be interested or even surprised if you're exporting millions of guns to Mexico and where cartels are purchasing them outside of America? Or maybe even in America because our laws are not strict enough to control the gun violence. So who's surprised that a president or an attempt to kill a president occurred? I guess the only surprise is that our Secret Service didn't do its job, but we're all not perfect. And so, this is just one of those days again. I guess we just don't remember when those children were killed by gunmen. How many children do we need to kill to remember? And now we have an attempt on a president or a candidate for presidency. And do we do anything about the gun? No. So who's surprised?
I totally agree with you, Professor. Unfortunately, because of the lobbying system in the United States, maybe, although these violent events take place frequently, either school events, etc., it doesn't change the overall policy. And many pro-Republican authors claim that it's about the history and culture of the United States because it's, Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, etc. But anyway, so that was.
I remember a culture long time ago where if you sacrificed the people by throwing them into a volcano, the volcano would not erupt and gods would be very happy because you sacrificed the human. That was a culture and that was a tradition. Have we moved out of that? I guess we've done some changes. Can we do better? Maybe. It really comes down, is it your son and daughter they're throwing into the volcano? And I guess that's where we are right now. And to answer that question, why? Why are we here in the 21st century, 2024, July 16th, and we are facing the most abhorrent, or most, let us say, put it this way, we're on the cusp of World War III. And why? Why are we so ignorant, so stupid, that we don't realize what is going on here? And there's one simple answer. But I'll let you move on to your next question before I move on to my answer.
Okay, thank you, Professor. So, United States is the still most important country for many Turkish scholars here, and we are closely following the political process prior to presidential elections this year in November. Do you think this event will change the course of events and will boost the chance of former President Trump, or is still a race going on? What do you think, Professor?
No, there is a moment in time where we all have an opportunity to really change the paradigm. So when the Soviet Union collapsed back in December 1991, we really had an opportunity to work together. We had our differences, and we still do, but we had a common understanding that we wanted to be united back there, at least on paper and sort of really in the spirit of things. And that's the most important thing, the spirit. So to go back to that issue, why don't we have that spirit of unity? Well, maybe we do when we have a crisis, because that's how people work. They work only when there's a crisis. Otherwise, they don't do anything. They only think it's lip service, it's politics. But when there's a crisis, oh God, we have to do something. When we have a war, we have to do something. When we have a coup, we have to do something. And now what do? Well, the question is, what does Donald J. Trump do? Well, if you listen to his rhetoric, he says, well, if I have the power to investigate my opponents, what am I going to do with my opponents? I'm going to get rid of them? So what happened after 2/16 in July 15th, the day before today? I got to get rid of my opponents. I guess maybe among them are really bad people. So I just take everybody out of circulation and make sure I replace them with my own. And this is the project 2025 that has been written by the Heritage Foundation, a very conservative think tank in the United States of America, here in Washington, D.C. And this is exactly what Trump has talked about already in his campaign and in his years after him losing the election, which he still denies. I mean, you're talking about millions of Americans who are following this line by this gentleman. And this is really shocking. And while these men and women, they're smart, there were a lot of people who had PhDs at the time of Adolf Hitler. They didn't expect that this was going to happen, what happened. But they believed in a strong man, a man who was patriotic. And now you have this photo shoot. I mean, this is Hollywood par excellence. You have the American flag. You have his arm up. Let's fight. I just got shot. And I mean, it's tragic. He could have been killed. And that is really tragic. But what do you deal in this moment? Do you say, okay, you realize the people are really at the end of their understanding. They're using violence. And I've been included as one of the victims. Do I get out there and stop the rhetoric that has caused this? On both sides. When you have to say, oh, those Democrats, they're leftists, they're revolutionaries, they want to overthrow the government. And the other way around, we're at the end of democracy. This apocalyptic rhetoric leads to only extreme solutions, including violence. So what can this mean? This assassination? It can mean a lot. We can de-escalate. We can begin to have normalized our understanding. But if you listen to the convention, the Republican National Convention, right now, as we speak, and you hear the type of candidate that has been chosen, Vance, to be the running mate, the vice president running mate for Donald J. Trump, you have to know what Vance stands for. So, for example, not even for incest, not even for rape, a woman will not be allowed an abortion. Imagine. And guess, why is it that the men don't have those kind of problems? I mean, what happens if the government says, oh no, you can't do this, you can't do that. But for the woman, it's okay. So it's very chauvinistic, a lot of other words for that. And so what will happen is that the suburban women who are educated, who do have a high understanding of what this is, their body, their choice, not somebody else's, and this is called liberalism. And liberalism in the world, in America, in the Middle East, in Turkey, everything is an illusion because people are scared. But I'll let you go on to your next question.
Thank you, Professor. Professor, we know that there have always been some political cleavages between Democratic Party and Republican Party, and that's normal in all democracies, in two-party democracies or multi-party democracies. There have always been such political differences. But in the last maybe 5-6 years or the last decade, we've seen in the United States that political polarization and extremism has reached a new highest level, maybe a peak, a new peak. So what do you think about the reasons of this? Because United States is the one of the most developed country in terms of economics and also freedom of opinion, etc. It's the center of best universities, best academic journals, etc. Why this is happening in the United States? Because it affects the rest of the world, especially in the Western Hemisphere also. What do you think about the reasons for this?
Well, one reason is the need to change. You see, we, unlike any other era, are living in an existential era. If we were in the era of the dinosaurs, that'd be a comparison. We don't have any more dinosaurs. And why? Well, that was because of the climate. And now we're talking about the climate. And we're not talking about in terms of some futuristic maybes. It's real. Just go out inside. Look at the temperatures. Look at the water problems. Look at the food security. Look at all the air issues that we're facing. And now you think this is hot? We have no idea what is going to be hot. And Turkey is right in the center of this inferno. And you know, that kind of threat means you have to change occupations. You can't be mining coal anymore. Oh, that's Appalachia, the mountain region. And you can't do things that you used to do like your father did for generations. You got to change. People don't like change. They like all the time what they can do, like their traditions. And traditions are hard because they do lay the foundation for a family. But a family also understands that they too need to recognize the sign, the writing on the wall. So there are principles. So those principles are, for example, respect, dignity for the other, for the other, not for yourself, not for what you believe in, but respect for the other. I don't care what religion you are, it's all in the same religious scriptures. It's called tolerance. And so much intolerance exists because our political leaders use it as a tool for their ability to consolidate power, to be elected. It's all about power. And the victim are the people, you and I. Unless you have enough money, enough ability, or you were born in the right place at the right time, so you don't need a visa. You can go anywhere, and that's, again, a privilege. But is that right? Is that just? No, and that's the problem. The core problem is we, as a people, forgotten our humanity. It's called justice. Not just and unjust. It's called justice. Because our people, I don't care if it's what religion you have, because we have a lot of religious people here in the United States or in the Middle East or in the Far East. It's about what is the justice that we have achieved or what we still are missing. And that is really the pillar, not only peace and security like in the UN Charter. There's a third one. And it's not one we compromise as an objective, it is the objective. And if you want to know what that means, well, look at the war in Ukraine. Look at how here in America, we understand justice. Is letting Mexicans, millions on the border, putting children in cages under Donald Trump's administration? Is that what we want? Is that really humanity? Is that what millions of Americans recognize? I don't think so. And it's really the crackdown on legal immigration that's going to happen. Forget the illegal. You're going to have here the idea we're going to have the largest historical mass deportation of 12 million illegals. Imagine 12 million illegals deported. Well, the airlines are going to make a lot of money, are they? What kind of country is this going to be? And if you think this is the beacon, forget it. So we have a lot to consider coming November. And as far as I'm concerned, I think there's still time because there are Republicans who left the Republican Party. They were what we call the Reagans. They were moderate, and the party has moved. And the party has always had that section of a very pious, very extreme, very ultranationalistic group. It's not new. I know, I wasn't a Republican. And I was in California. I'm a Californian. I know Reagan. I know Bush Sr. I know this entire era. But I also know that the very right wing, the Tea Party, and others in those groups have gained through their very conservative views, which is intellectually rational. If you like Carl Schmitt was the chair or the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the Third Reich. Great guy. And his translations into English filtered its way up to an attorney under George W. Bush Jr. called Young, that's his name. And he said, waterboarding, that's okay. That's torture, but that's okay. Because according to the interpretation of this law that comes from Carl Schmitt's legal interpretation, we have the American culture. So it's a little bit long to answer your question, but I think it's important that America is not an isolated place. It takes all of its immigrants, ideas from others. It transforms them, it markets them, it innovates them, which doesn't happen in so many countries. That's why everybody loves America, because you have opportunity. You're not just running in what I call to my students when my hamster is in the wheel and says, I'm going places. I'm sorry, Fred, you're not going anywhere. You're in a cage. And so that's where we are today. People don't understand that they're not going anywhere. And if they aren't going to make some changes, they're literally going to perish.
So what I get from your words, Professor, is that you blame the populism, but especially right-wing populism, for the rise of.
I blame all populism, left or right.
Okay.
I don't care. If somebody tells me there is a terrorist group out there, then I want that terrorist group to end. But I need the proof. Not just tell me rhetorically, oh, they've done this. And I have an example back in 2017. I need to have evidence right now. Show me. Nothing that comes inadmissibly through torture. Nothing that is about hearsay. Give me an eyewitness account, documentation, real proof. And I assure you, our institutions in America will execute. But we are being infiltrated by appointees like here in the United States. And our system, hopefully, will have enough appeals courts to review decisions by district federal judges. As recently as this case was stealing documents in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, by Donald J. Trump. And those are really very serious issues. And now the Hulk bunk is another one, and you can go on and on. And this is all about politics and foreign policy in America. So what do we do?
Mm-hmm. So, Professor, I think since United States is a long time running, democratic country based on rule of law principles, I think whether no matter the result of the election is, there'll be a continuing democracy in the US. And from this point, let's move on to Turkish-American relations. We are now editing a new book on Turkish-American relations together, and we hope it will be published soon. And we studied together, Professor, in a very detailed way with the help of some real important scholars and professionals, all the problematic issues in Turkish-American relations. Of course, we'll leave the information to the book, but if I ask you honestly, I mean, the most intense issues in Turkish-American relations that we should solve immediately, what would you say? I mean, we should solve this and relations will be much better. What's in your idea is the most important problem in bilateral relations?
What is our objective? That's the first question. Is this going to be this old rehash nostalgia of strategic partners, like in the Cold War, which doesn't have any more relevancy because we're not in the Cold War? Are we going to really want friendship? Where's that word friendship? I mean, you and I are friends. We've known each other. We smile. I go to Turkey. I have friends all the time because it's there. It's ingrained. People like each other. The food is there. The people are there. People are smiling. So what? So why don't we have that in our relationship, politically, diplomatically? Militarily, we do. We have some real professional people who understand, but we always label it under the word security. God forbid we didn't have that word. If we could just sit down at a table and have some nice conversation. So you see, the whole problem is you have this illusion. No better word, illusion. That's what Stephen Waltz refers to it, illusion. Where you want to have this nostalgic idea, and you do keep it going alive in the armed forces to a good deal, but there is another generation who doesn't understand the Cold War, who are of a different background, and that again is a challenge to the stability of a NATO member. We are all NATO members. And our job is to remember the core principles. Like I said, what is the objective? Well, the objective is, let us keep the principles. Forget these interests, because that's always what leads us to these grievances. Let us keep the interests in context of our principles. And we won't get into the hand in the cookie jar. We'll find ourselves in a better place because our principles are pretty simple. We want to live together. We want to travel together. Oh yeah, you get your visas. Don't worry. You know, and why not? You're a member of NATO. You know, do our job, clean up the mess, get the people who don't deserve coming here, knock them out. And I'm sure the Turkish internal security can do this if it wants to. So it's a willingness of cooperation at all levels, not at just some. And it must be politically sound. And I'm really saying this is the part what we need to fill. We need to fill the understanding what is justice for our relationship. Our justice is to help each other correct the wrongs of the past, to make sure that the narrative we are all talking is really systematic. If we have differences in our narratives, then let us, the academicians, not the politicians, the academicians, do their job. Let's research it. Let's get it out there. If there's different interpretations because the documentation gives that kind of proof, so be it. But don't let this get into some kind of political give and take. And that's where we are in this relationship. And I sincerely believe that there's enough smart people now in the cabinet who understand what was the fault line that we never really looked at. We have some good people who are communicating now on both sides. And that's what diplomacy is about, communication. And if we can communicate, because I have to communicate every day with students, with people, with politicians, I don't care who it is. And I've got to make it in one very short half page, not a big lecture like now. But my point is, you have to get to the point. So all I can say to reiterate what the point is, what is the objective? Just to shake hands and schmooze, or to really make our two countries what Great Britain and the USA is, a special relationship?
Thank you, Professor. One last question, Professor. Since we found you, you are very busy, I know, and you are an important expert on international law. You know, during our efforts to organize an international conference about on Turkish-American relations, you also noticed that there was a huge reaction in Turkey against Israeli operations into Gaza after the, of course, brutal attack executed by Hamas militants on October 7. So, from the perspective of international law, since you studied the topic in various cases starting from the Second World War until today, I mean, could you tell us basically how the United Nations, its charter, and the international law would comment on the Hamas attack and Israeli response to this? This is important because Turkish audience doesn't know too much about international law, and I'm hoping that we can organize together a special course or certification program on this because it is important and it's developing.
You know, it's always a matter of perception in a conflict, in a crisis. One calls it something, the other calls it different. So the one is a martyr, the other one is a criminal. And yet each feels justified in what they're doing. Now we have norms, we have conventions. We wrote it down in the United Nations Charter. We wrote it down in our different conventions for the Declaration of Human Rights. We have set up precedents through international treaties and agreements. That means that when a country violates those principles, those laws, like sovereignty, or an act of aggression, like Russia invading Ukraine, for whatever reason, and they may have good reasons, but that doesn't change that they have committed the supreme crime of all crimes, to quote the Russian lawyer at Nuremberg, or the Soviet Union. But my point to answer your question is one, why are we sitting here 70 years and seeing a lot of people called Palestinians not have a roof over their head? Why are they treated in this way? And don't tell me it's the Israelis. Guess what? They have Arab friends, rich ones. And there's no reason why there wasn't enough money and support to go out there and help these people from all United States, etc. And then they say, well, I gave aid. Well, did you make sure that aid went to the people or into the pockets of some people? Corruption. You know, the point is, if you want to do the job, you do it right the first time or you go home. It's simple. I say that to my students. I'll say that to anybody. If you want to really commit to doing something, do it. And do it now and make it sure it works now. Not tomorrow, nothing down the later, now. Because people want it now. And the Palestinian people deserve it better than anybody else, right now. Now we have the problem, we have leaders. We have ideology, we have interests. And this is all clouded by our clear objective, which is to get the people out of misery. Instead of looking at them 70 years through our lenses on television and elsewhere. So what do? Okay, there's no doubt in anybody's mind, at least I would think, that a horrific massacre of civilians, 1,000 plus kidnapping civilians, is a war crime. It's a crime against humanity. And don't forget, they are militia. So maybe they're not soldiers, but they do represent the Hamas government. So they do have a status to where they really would go to the ICC for war crime, because the ICC recognizes Palestine as in their jurisdiction.
Yes.
Maybe not Israel, but this is Palestine. So again, that's the one thing. Now you're saying, okay, there's inhumanity because of the thousands and thousands that have been killed in this epic of trying to fight Hamas. And Hamas is not like it's doing nothing. It does use civilians as the shields, and they become, in the jargon of international law, targets. But still, they're humans. And this is about how to conduct a war. And the Americans, before they went into Osama bin Laden and got the gentleman, if you want to call him that, they made sure that nobody, no civilians, are going to be killed, if that's possible. You do your homework. And this has not been done enough, I believe, in the case of Israel. And therefore, this prosecutor, Khan of the ICC, has asked the first chamber, or the chamber of the International Criminal Court, to issue arrest warrants for Netanyahu and the leader of the Hamas militia group. So if you want justice, that's where you can go. In the meantime, you have all this money, you're a neighbor, you can do all of this stuff, send your own troops in there, get a UN peacekeeping troop, make it happen. You don't like Israel? Leverage your interests. Leverage your interests in terms of making sure that you, the USA, Turkey, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, who cares? If you really want to help the people, you can do it. And last point is this. In 1948, I believe, the Soviet Union closed, no, it was 1961. I can't remember exactly. Anyway, the point is, the city of Berlin was totally isolated. And for 1 year, the Americans, every 30 seconds, had a plane land and take off from Tempelhof in Berlin to supply over 1 million people with food, medicine, and all kind of aid. And here we can't do it in the 21st century with all our technology and everything. We got to be able to do it better. And we got to be able to do it really together, cooperate together. And this is where U.S.-Turkey relations has that moment again. And it didn't take advantage because everybody was going off with their story. Well, it's them and it's them and them. Who cares? Stop the story and do the job. And after doing the job, we'll talk about the story.
I agree with you, Professor. Most of the Muslim world's leaders, I think they are spending their time to criticize, condemn Israel, not to help Palestinians. If they want to do it, there are ways to do this, but they are not interested in helping or recognizing Palestine, just to demonizing Israel. I think that is their basic aim. That's why they are not doing something concrete about Palestinian statehood. But thank you so much, Professor. We'll continue to see each other. You'll continue to teach at Istanbul Kent University, I believe, and we're going to organize this conference hopefully next year. And we have the book coming on Turkish-American relations. So let's hope that there'll be brighter times in Turkish-American relations. After the elections, all will pass, all will be forgotten. The assassination attempt, there'll be a new administration, either Republican or Democratic, but both are welcomed here in Turkey. So let's hope there'll be better times. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Wish you a very nice day. So thank you.
Bye, Professor.
Bye-bye.